This meeting is a little different from any other big book meeting, okay? In most Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, we do a portion or a reading sometimes of chapter 5 or chapter 3. We don't do that here. And in a big book meeting, sometimes what happens is you'll have different people read different parts of the book. And when I was new, I got really lost and confused. Even sometimes I know the big book and I go into a meeting and I'm like looking at the ceiling, getting distracted, can't hear this person share. So we put together this meeting so that what we do is we do an overview of the 164 in the very beginning, okay? So we know exactly why we're reading, what we're reading. Then, during the reading, there's only one person that reads. That would be me. But during the reading, we really encourage crosstalk. So, there's a lot of people here that have a lot of time and can offer some feedback. If you have a question, what's Armistice Day? I don't know what that phrase means, okay? Just shout it out and we stop and we'll discuss it, okay? If not, the reading moves kind of quick. During the reading, it's not the time to check in and share for 10 minutes. But afterwards, after the reading, then we'll have a half an hour or till 7:30 to share on the topic, okay? Any questions? Cool. So, how many people, tonight we're going to be reading How It Works, up to the third step prayer. Yay! This is a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. When I started, I thought, well, that's awfully big. I'm not going to read it. I'm just going to go to meetings, hear what other people have to say, get the Cliff Notes. And I don't have to read the whole thing. But then I realized when I went through it with somebody that knows this book and walked through the steps with me out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, these are stories right here. This is our program in the first 164 pages of the big book. You hear people say the 164, in the 164, that's this part of the big book. And that's where our program is outlined, okay? In the 164 pages of the big book. And it's in the contents page, in the very beginning, okay, is the 164 pages. There's been 4 different editions of the big book. If you have this book and Experience, Strength, and Hope, you have everything ever written in the big book. Because this book is all the stories that have been taken out in the first, second, and third edition. So the 4th edition and first, second, and third stories that were taken out, okay? We change the stories, we don't change the first 164 pages, right? Strong sentiment, we don't change it. That's where our program is. But the stories get changed every edition, okay? Any questions so far? All right, let's start. Out of the 164, does anybody need a big book? It's a good idea to have a big book in a big book meeting. Just bring them on back up here when you're done. Thank you. So, the preface, the very beginning of the big book, in the preface it says, first off, we don't change the 164. There's a strong sentiment against any change being made to it. That outlines our program. And we hope that, at the very end of the preface, it says, we hope that either in reading the stories or in what we've written, that somewhere in there you go, I felt like that. I think this might work for me. That, me too, right? Now, the forwards, there's been 4 different forwards. The first one, 1939, the second, 1955, the third in 1976, and the 4th one, that's probably the one you guys have now, is in 2001. The first one, in the very first page of the preface to the first edition, it says, the main purpose of this book is to show you precisely how we have recovered. So there's clear-cut directions in there, and we'll point them out as we go. In the second edition, 1955, we threw in some history, so you're going to find a lot in there about how we met, came together, and this whole thing developed, okay? In the third and the fourth, the forward to the third and the forward to the fourth, we'll talk about how we've grown, how many countries we're in, and new groups that have risen in our growth over the years, okay? The big book starts right here, at the doctor's opinion. This isn't Dr. Bob. Our 2 founders are Dr. Bob and Bill Wilson. Dr. Bob is our second founder. His is the first story that we find in the stories. And Bill's story is right here. So this doctor that wrote the doctor's opinion is Dr. Silkworth, okay? Dr. Silkworth was the head doctor at the only hospital pretty much that worked with alcoholics and drug addiction, okay? Dr. Silkworth's the one that detoxed Bill. He worked with many alcoholics, 40 to 50,000 alcoholics in his time. But he also described the allergy and how sick we are and alcoholism as a disease, okay? Talks about being irritable, restless, discontent. He talks about frothy emotional appeal. The message has to have depth and weight. Somehow in there he says, you know what? We don't have a pill that'll fix you. No synthetic knowledge that we doctors have has been able to fix you guys. But whatever these men have to say seems to work. You basically need a spiritual slap on the head. We can't do that, but they can, right? So in there we may have heard those A, B, and C's, and we're going to go over that tonight, okay? Bill's story is the first chapter. Bill's story, our first founder, he talks about how, being in the war and God shots, and then how he crossed that line, and then he had to stop stealing from his family, right? Depression, pills, one more time, I tried, I couldn't do it, and then the message being carried to him and the importance of carrying it to another. Somewhere in Bill's story you might find, if I pick this up for the first time, oh my gosh, I'm an alcoholic. Or maybe I didn't relate to Bill. So let's keep going, and there's a solution. It's kind of like all of us chimed in at that point, and we went, a lot of us felt just like Bill. You might be one of us, a real Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. We have a solution. Come along for the ride. More about alcoholism. We read it in a meeting. How does it start off? None of us wanted to admit that we were real alcoholics, right? Nobody wants to think they're bodily and mentally different than their fellows. And then it's just like in a participation meeting where each one of us kind of tells a little bit. Fred the accountant, the car salesman, the jaywalker. And in there you might go, okay, now I can relate. That sounds more like me. But along the way we've mentioned spirituality a bunch, right? And if you walk in here like most of us have, you go, oh no, don't do that God thing with me, right? We've got a whole chapter, We Agnostics. It's not saying you got to figure out who he is or what God is. It's all about having you lack that power to get sober so far. Don't worry about the spirituality of this. You lack that power. There's a power bigger than you or greater than you that's going to be able to, that you obviously lack, that's going to help restore you to sanity. Right? It's in the being willing to say there might be something other than me that can help me become sane again. And sometimes it might just be that a room of 50 of you guys have managed to not die of this. Show me how. Okay? But in other words, it's saying don't overthink the God thing. Come along for the ride. You're just not it. If you got a God, good. Don't worry about it. If you don't have a God, don't worry about it. Just come along for the ride. We're going to get into the work. You find your higher power and that relationship with your higher power in the working of the steps. So don't ever let anybody say you can't start them until you figure out. Right? So that's what that chapter is. It's a whole lot of explanation of don't overthink it. You lack that power. Come on. Now, chapter 5, what we're going to read tonight. We're going to break this up in 3 different weeks, okay? Tonight we're going to go up until the 3rd step prayer. So, in chapter 5, how many times have you've heard it read in a meeting where at the end of the steps we go, our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostics, and our personal adventures make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, I'm an alcoholic. B, no human power can relieve me of my alcoholism. Something bigger than me is going to have to work, right? God couldn't. What if he were sought? We're going to go over that. But how cool is that? That is steps 1 and 2 that up until this point we went, oh my gosh, that me too. I'm an alcoholic. That we started off in the beginning hoping that you'd find. And then we do steps 3, and we do an inventory, resentment, fear, sex, right? And then into action, chapter 6, we got a sponsor, so we're going to learn how to tell that inventory to somebody so we can learn some facts about ourselves. We're going to do some amends. We're going to learn about character defects. We're going to learn how to keep ourselves on track to stay spiritually fit. And all of a sudden, our outlooks are going to be a whole lot different, right? But we have to learn how to help somebody else. So chapter 7 of working with others is all about step 12, how we reach our hand out to the new person, how we start sponsoring somebody, how we talk to that other alcoholic, right? To the wives, to the family afterwards, and to the employers. Briefly, in that time, we handed this book out, and anybody was picking it up. You might have been somebody that has a drunk person working for them. It might be a family member. It might be a wife. It might be a husband. Who knows? But if they picked it up, we have a chapter so that they can read it. But it also describes the alcoholic and the beginning of Al-Anon. And a vision for you, Bill sums it all up. Everything that we've come through all the way through up until here. The whole 164, the program. Our book's meant to be suggestive only. Remember, the old-timers, pretty much Bill and Bob at the time, had 2 years sober when we started writing this book. Oh, my goodness. So in 1939, we realized we know only a little, but here's our book, Don't Die. Pretty much it. That's the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Dr. Bob's Nightmare is the first story. Any questions? So what have we learned so far up until this point? We learned about an allergy. I might be a little leery if I'm an alcoholic, right? I learned about Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, me hiding bottles. Oh my gosh, that's me, right? I learned about the jaywalker and the phenomenon and this constant, like the fear, the everything just crashing down around me. The quicksand, that feeling that I just don't know how to get out of, right? And maybe a little bit of hope that you guys have an answer. And then we agnostics, don't worry about it, but I realize I lack that power. Can you help me find a power bigger than me, right? So that's where we're at right now in the steps. And we're going to be on chapter 58 or chapter 5, okay? Is everybody there? No questions? Remember, if there's something I say or you have a question about it, especially right now, it's a quick reading today, but it's a big one, okay? It's like my favorite one. So raise your hand or shout something out, okay, if you have a question, all right? How it works. Now, I read how it works in a meeting last night, and I want to tell you that some people, when I was new, used to read it like this. Rarely have we seen a person fail his third failed breath, right? And then some people read it very dramatic, and some people try to read it, you know. There's a reason why we do some of these readings in meetings. This is my belief. It's not a rule in the book. But there's a reason why we read these. And isn't it for the person that's sitting in the room that's never been in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous? So when we read them, there's some important things right there. Read it as if you want that person to hear what you're going to say. Like you're talking to somebody that has no idea what Alcoholics Anonymous is. And it's kind of important when you think of it that way. So we've come through all this, and we're starting to realize we're an alcoholic. Rarely have we, those of us here that have done this stuff, right? Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Doesn't say perfectly. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. It's usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They're not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They're naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. Now remember, 1930s, 1939, we were put, where did they put the alcoholics? We didn't have AA, we didn't have detoxes. Where did they put us? In the mental hospitals. Some of us were getting frontal lobotomies and shock treatment and weird, anything to just get this person to stop, right? So maybe some of the people that have had other issues too, they might be talking about them in this first section, okay? It also doesn't mean that just because I didn't walk in the room and in my first meeting decide I'm going to be honest about everything, that I'm incapable of being honest. It doesn't say that either, okay? So, there are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Doesn't say from the get-go, it says, do you have the capacity? Are you able to be honest? I think I got it in me. I'm just not sure if I'm going to start off that way. So our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we're like now. We talked about this in the beginning in the doctor's opinion. When we share our story with somebody, what are we going to do? We're going to share. You can't just share about, hi, I'm all better and this is great, and people that are new are going to go, what? You don't know where I've been. You don't know how I feel, you know? But then somebody just does a drunkalog with no hope and no answer. We don't get anything out of that sometimes either. So what's important when we tell our story is, what it was like, what happened, and what we're like now. And if you've decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. And some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way. All of us did, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, I think this is more important than that top paragraph, but we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Did we come in here with a lot of fear? Yeah. Oh, yeah. We beg of you, just grab our hand. Just give us come on. Don't be scared. Just grab my hand. Be fearless, just from the start. That's the most, I think, I'm not going to come in here and tell you honestly, I've been lying about everything for a whole long time. But when I walk in, I might be okay with you making me feel like I can reach out and grab your hand or shake your hand, or you might even remember my name. So we beg of you to be fearless from the very start. Some of us tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go. Absolutely. What are some of our old ideas? Or some of these we thought we could find an easier, softer way. I'm just going to check in, get my court card signed. I don't really need to do those steps. I'm not as bad as you people, right? Some of those things we try to go, I don't really have to do that step. I don't really have to do, right? We thought we could find an easier, softer way. Just get me out of this mix. I just got to do a 5-day detox and then I'm done. That's it. I'm good. I got this. Just help me get the kid back, the car back, the stuff I crashed to the ground. No. Thorough from the very start. Remember, we deal with alcohol. It's cunning, baffling, powerful. And without help, it's too much for us. There is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at that turning point, made that decision, right, to go on to an alcoholic death, blotting out of our minds that intolerable situation, or accepting help, right? We stood at that turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Now, here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. It does not mean that these are suggestions. If you want to do this thing, you do these steps. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Because what? I lack that power, right? 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And 5, we took that inventory right, and we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we were entirely ready to have God remove all of our defects of character that we learned from that inventory. 7, we humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Willing. And 9, made direct amends to such people, wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, we continue, because now we got through those are called the working steps. 1, 2, 3, 10, 11, 12, we do all the time. But the 4 through 9 are the ones that we clean out that refrigerator, We get all that stuff in there that's kind of been sitting around. And then 10, 11, 12 we do every day. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for the knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. And 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result, not as one of the, but as the result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. Many of us exclaim, what an order, I can't go through with it. We came in here and we're like, oh no, can I just get my court card signed? I don't want to do all that, right? Many of us did that. Many of us exclaimed, what an order, I can't go through with that. Don't be discouraged. Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We're not saints. The point is that we're willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we've set down are guides to progress. We've claimed spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Where do we think our description of the alcoholic chapter to the agnostic and our personal adventures before and after? This is one of my favorite aha moments. Right here. Where do we find the description of our description of the alcoholic? Well, the doctor, in the doctor's opinion, he described it, didn't he? He described that allergy. Bill described it. We described it, and there's a solution. Pretty much all through here, we described our description of the alcoholic. Even in the beginning of We Agnostics, if you can't stop once you start drinking, right? You might be one of us. So our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, our personal adventures, Bill talked about it, Fred, Jim, the car salesman, we all through here. Even the doctor's opinion talked about Hank and Fitz, right? We had a couple personal stories up until this point. So our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, our personal adventures before and after made clear 3 pertinent ideas, which are steps 1 and 2, which is, oh my God, A, that we were alcoholic and couldn't manage our own lives. I so found myself up until now. B, probably no human power. Every one of those chapters hits it home and describes B, no human power, right? And C, now I like to say, because some people go, oh, there's the God thing, but God could and would if he were sought. Also, just think something other than me, something that I lack, a power that I lack, right? Could and would if he were sought. Even if it's the process of what you guys did in the steps. If I search that out, if I ask you how, I believe that that will help me come back to sanity. Does that sound like steps 1 and 2? Yeah. Some people go, that's steps 1, 2, and 3. No, 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 no. In the original manuscript, which is always up front here, I want to read something to you guys. It was taken out, and it's the one thing I wish they probably wouldn't have taken out, but it says, right after the A, B, and C, it says, if you are not convinced of these vital issues, you ought to reread the book up until this point, or throw it away. Up until this point, right here. But being convinced, you're now at step 3. What? All right, so that means that I found steps 1 and 2, the pertinent ideas in doing steps 1 and 2 up until this point. By just even reading that book with somebody, I did steps 1 and 2, okay? If I'm convinced of them. Now I'm ready to do step 3. Any questions? Okay. Being convinced, we were at step 3. Nowhere else does it say in squiggly lines, you're now at step 1 or you're now at step 2. Those are concept steps that we get from reading up until this point. So it says, being convinced you're now at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. Just what do we mean by that? And just what do we do? Right? How many people have gone through the steps and have had somebody take them through the steps and have no idea what's on this page that's coming up next? I did once. Because somebody goes, you ready to do step 3? Let's say the prayer. All right, move on. You're going to do your inventory. And I'm like, all right, good, good. What's step 3 meaning? I'm like, I don't know. We said a prayer and I started working on an inventory, right? You can't do step 3 unless you know this page. And it's a cool page. Can you tell I'm excited about this particular reading? All right. And that's all we're going to today. But just what do we mean by that? Just what do we do? The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. On that basis, we're almost always in collision with something, somebody, even though our motives are good. Even though our motives are good. Most people try to live by self-propulsion. Each person likes to be the actor who wants to run the whole show. Is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players in his own way. If only my arrangements would stay put. That's why I said this book study was based out of my own self-will and riot, because I go to meetings, I go, if I ran this book study, that's how we do it. If only people would do as I wished, or as he wished, the show would be great. Everybody, including myself, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. In trying to make these arrangements, our actor, or me, may be sometimes quite virtuous. I meant good. I was, He may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest or self-sacrificing. On the other hand, he may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. I want what I want. I want to get what I want. I want you to believe what I want you to do. But for the most part, right, as with most humans, he is likely to have a varied traits. When we know we want to get somebody to do what we want them to do, we either know how to do a little bit of the bat into the eye, or a little bit of this, a little bit, right? Or we know how to, don't you dare come against, right? And if that doesn't work, we'll mix it up a different way. But either way, I want you to do what I want you to do. I want to get what I want to get. I want it to go my way. Oh, wait, don't look this way. Don't look at me. I think this is what has to be done out here, right? Even though our motives are good. And what usually happens? Self will run right. You know, I'm going to share a little story about someone who said, I have permission to share the story. We won't say names because it's being recorded. So, trying to understand self will run right, even though our motives are good. Having a conversation with somebody right here, and over here is her significant other having a conversation with a business partner, somebody on the phone, right? And she keeps interrupting over here going, no, wait, say this. No, you got to do it this way. Okay. What? No, if you just tell them, all right, now wait, no. And trying to tell them how to talk this conversation that she's no part of. And then he gets upset. And then what do we do as alcoholics? Go, oh, I was only trying to be helpful. What is his problem? Oh my gosh. Completely ignoring what I have going on right here. Even though our motives are good sometimes. We do it all the time. What usually happens? The show does not come off very well. He begins to think, or I begin to think, that life just doesn't treat me well. He decides to exert himself more. He becomes, on the next occasion, still more demanding or gracious, whatever the case may be. Still, the play does not suit him. Now, admitting he may be somewhat at fault. I might be a little bit at fault. But I am absolutely sure that other people are more to blame than me. He becomes angry, indignant. Indignant is like my favorite description of the alcoholic. What does it mean? Yes! When I'm angry or hurt at what I perceive to be unfair to me. Is that that's me. That's totally me. I don't know about you, but that was. So what happens is me as an alcoholic, I become angry, indignant, self-pitying. Whatever his basic trouble, is he not really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? Is he not the victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if only he managed it well? Is it not evident to the rest of the players that these are the things that he wants, and do not his actions make each one of them wish to retaliate, snatching all they can out of the show? I'm taking my toys and going home. I don't like the way you... Is he not, even in his best moments, a producer of confusion rather than harmony? Even in my best moments, am I not a producer of confusion rather than harmony? Our actor is self-centered. I am. Egocentric, as people like to call it nowadays. He's like the retired businessman who lolls in the Florida sunshine and whines and in the winter, complaining about the sad state of the nation. Everybody can relate? I needed that one explained to me. It's Jack's favorite. But, so, the guy's in his Hawaiian shirt and he's down in Florida and he's got his, iced tea and he's like sitting there in his lounge chair and he's going, if I ran this country, this would be done this way. If I was the president, I'd have this all cleared up. Right? Some people go, no, still can't relate. That's, How many people have been in a recovery house and sit there and you go, if I ran this place, I would not have that stupid rule about me not being able to use the phone right now. Right? That's the dumbest thing ever. I'm sitting in the Florida sunshine going, if I ran this place, right? We all, in one way or another, can be that man in the Florida sunshine. Pointing our finger. Or the minister who sighs over the sins of the 20th century. We all have those ones that look down, are holier than thou, right? The politician and reformers who are sure that all the world would be utopia, that means perfect world, if only the rest of the world would just behave. And the outlaw safecracker who thinks society has wronged him. If you've gone through what I've gone through, you would have drank too. and the alcoholic who's lost all and locked up. Whatever our protestations, remember what are our protestations? I protest, I don't like it, no. Right? Whatever the reason being, are we not concerned with ourselves, our resentments, and our self-pity? Selfishness and self-centeredness, we think that is the root of all our troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking. I want what I want, when I want to get what I want to get, right? Self-seeking, self-pity. We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation. I didn't do anything to provoke that. Right? What? I didn't poke the bear. He's so mean. Why did he yell at me? Right? But we invariably find that at some time in the past, we have made a decision based on our own self, which later placed us in the position to be hurt. How many people new in the rooms heard the words, self will run riot? When I came in, I heard that. I'm like, well, that's not me. I don't know what that is. I just know that it sounds bad, and so it can't be me. I can't be selfish. I give $1 to somebody if they need it. Right? I did not understand the idea self will run riot until I read this page. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves. Me, me, me. What's the alcoholic's favorite song? Me, 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 me. They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is an extreme example of self will run riot. That self doesn't mean just selfishness, it means self-pity, self-seeking, self-delusion. I think I'm more than I am in your eyes, or what I want you to believe. And my fears, my fear. Above everything else, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kills us. God makes that possible. And there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore. Sometimes we were raised very well, right? But we could not live up to them even though we would have liked to. Neither could we reduce our self-centeredness by just wishing or trying on our own power. I lacked that power, right? We had to have God's help. If the word God is going to disturb you here, write love or something else in there, okay? But it's something that you don't have, so it's not you, okay? This is the how and why of it. Do you remember on the beginning here we said, so this step 3, what do we mean by that? What do we do? Well, this is the how and why of it. Oh, okay. First, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. Next, we decided that in the hereafter, in this drama of life, God was going to be the director. He's the principal. We are his agents. He's the father. We are his children. Most good ideas are simple, and this concept was the keystone of a new and triumphant arch, through which we passed to freedom. If you've ever heard me say, you've got to, if ever in doubt, anywhere in the steps, go back to the third. That's just something I believe. When in doubt, go back to the third. What's a keystone? Yeah, let's try to, like we have got little blocks, right? Let's try to make an arch right here in our mind. I'm trying to explain it because we're recording here. We're going to put 2 here, 2 here. We're going to 2 columns. We're going to make an archway. By the time we get to the top, what happens? It's going to fall. We can't get them to match up there, right? They're blocks. The keystone is an odd-shaped one, kind of like this, almost like a square pentagon, right? That locks at the top and pushes all those other blocks together. It's the keystone, it's the locking stone that makes the archway. The third step is the keystone that holds all the other steps together. That archway so that we can walk through to freedom. Wow. That's pretty powerful. My sponsor once said, there's no place that you have to sign a contract when you walk in these rooms, right? But she goes, if there was, it would be here. It's pretty powerful, this step. It's the keystone. It's the one that holds all the other steps together. When in doubt, go back to the third. Right? Let's go on because we're going to finish right up here. When we sincerely took such a position. Now remember I said there's promises in each step. The next paragraph is going to explain the promises of the third step. Then we're going to read the third step prayer. And then we're going to do this last paragraph and review it, okay? And if you guys want to do it together, we will. But let's think about it. When we sincerely took such a position, all sorts of remarkable things happened. We had a new employer, being all-powerful. He provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. Established on such footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. More and more, here's a promise, we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. As we felt a new power flow in, here's a promise, we enjoyed peace of mind. We discovered we could face life successfully. As we became conscious of his presence, here's a promise, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, and the hereafter. We were reborn. When we straighten out spiritually, when we, what is it? We straighten out mentally and physically?
Spiritual maladies overcome.
Yes. And the spiritual maladies. So that's a promise. If we straighten out spiritually, then the promise being that we'll straighten out mentally and physically. Right. So there's different ones throughout there, but these would be the ones that would be considered the promises of the third step. Okay? We were now at step 3. Many of us said to our Maker, as we understood him, God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those that I would help. Of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life, may I do thy will always. Now, we thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready, that we could at last abandon ourselves utterly to him, to a power bigger than ourselves, right? We found it very desirable to take this step with an understanding person. In working with others, when we talk about sponsorship, it does say that this is one of those places you need somebody, right? You need somebody. An understanding person. It says right there, I'm going to have to do this step with somebody. The third step, you do it with somebody, okay? Preferably a sponsor. An understanding person such as a wife, a best friend, or a spiritual advisor. But it's best to meet God alone rather than with one who might misunderstand. Back in the day, we didn't have a lot of people that understood the third step. Now we've got a lot of them. You pretty much are going to be able to find somebody to do your third step with, I'm pretty sure. But the wording was, of course, quite optional, as long as we express the idea, voicing it without reservation. There's a girl in one of the houses that said, I've got to memorize these words. Do you know what these words mean? And she's like, no, I just got to memorize them. It's my homework. And I'm like, well, the wording's quite optional. If you say that and when you mess up, they'll know you got it out of the book. Because it does say that. Voicing it without reservation. This was only a beginning, though if honestly and humbly made, an effect, sometimes a very great one, was felt at once. So now let's think about what it is that, if you guys want to do your third step tonight, but let's read what those words mean. Okay? Obviously, we've got to understand them to read them. I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Some people try to make sense of whether or not it's God's will. How do I know whether I'm allowing God's will or or my will? I'm like, it's happening either way. You wake up that morning, I'm going to make it rain today. It's got to rain today. It's got to rain today. I can't do that. I can't make that happen. Today's happening, one way or another. Stuff's going to happen right in front of me. That's God's will. Right? So it's pretty much like as if I open my arms and I go, what you got for me today? What you got? Put in front of me whatever you want. Mold me. Do with me as you wish. Oh, crap, I got to do an amends. No, I didn't want to do that. Okay, you know what I mean? Put in front of me whatever you want today. Flat tire. No. What you got for me today? Put in front of me whatever you want. I got to go on a job interview? Oh, fear. What you got for me today? Put in front of me whatever you want. Relieve me of the bondage to self. What's that? This page that we just read. My fear. Relieve me of my fear, my insecurity. What if I fail? What if I can't? What if I don't want it? What if you don't like me? What if I don't know if I want to do that. Relieve me of this self-will that I learned on this page we just read. Relieve me of the bondage of that self, that I might better do thy will, whatever you put in front of me today. Right? Take away my difficulties. Does this mean take Susie out of the picture? Get her away from my job. I don't want to work with her anymore. No. What are my difficulties? My fear, my insecurity, my I don't want to. Yeah. Take away my difficulties so that what? Victory over whatever you just put in front of me today, so I can walk through whatever you just put in front of me today. So victory over this means that I can bear witness. I can put my hand out to somebody next week and go, I just went through making an amends last week. I just went on a job interview. I just did that. I can help. So victory over this means that I can help somebody else walk through without the fear, the insecurity, the self-seeking, the self. So victory over this means that I can walk through this and put my hand out to somebody else next week. Boom! Pretty powerful, huh? So how does that work into some of this stuff? Remember, I said it's not about whether, oh, I don't understand this. I'm working on my third step. It's confusing me. What's God's will? It's happening whether you like it or not. Just what's happening today? What's going to happen to me today? Oh my gosh, I got to do an inventory? No. No. What you got for me? Do an inventory. All right. Well, take me out of my fear of doing this. What's my sponsor going to think when I read it to her? So that I can walk through that, and then I can put my hand out and help somebody else do their inventory. Make that amends. Sponsorship. I was scared to death to sponsor somebody when I first came back. I was like, oh no, I don't know if I can do that. What if I fail? What if I say something? What if When in doubt, go back to the third. What you got for me? Oh, you want me to sponsor somebody. Okay. Take away my difficulties. Relieve me of the bondage of self and my fear so that I can better walk through this, and maybe then victory over this, doing this inventory and stuff and the steps, that I might be able to put my hand out to somebody else. Wow. Also, the wording being about we and us, which is kind of cool. This is a powerful prayer. How many people in here want to end the meeting or the reading part of it tonight by doing our third step prayer? Yeah? Completely up to you guys. Those of you that want to join in, okay? But how about we do that? God, I offer myself to Thee to build with me and do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness, those that I would help, of Thy power, Thy love, and Thy way of life. May I do Thy will always. Wow. That's it for this week.